The knock came just after dusk. 3 unsure taps, a pause, then one more like a question. I opened the door to the chill of early fall in Riverbend, Oregon, and to a man I hadn't seen since I was 10. Thomas Miller, mid-50s, narrow shoulders under a thrift store peacoat, gray stubble set like frost on a face I knew and didn't, stood on my porch at 412 Maple Street, his eyes, tired, careful, almost apologetic, flicked to the welcome mat, then up to me. "Ethan," he said, voice frayed at the edges. "It's me. Your dad." He didn't step forward. He didn't smile. He held a faded baseball cap in both hands like it might keep him from shaking. I didn't answer at first. "I'm Ethan Miller, 30, structural engineer, the kind of person who solves with numbers what other people feel in their bones." Work boots on the rack behind me, blue flannel sleeves rolled to the elbow, pencil still tucked behind my ear from a late check on beam loads. And here he was, an unsolved variable I'd sealed off 20 years ago, breathing fog into the porch light. "Why now?" I said. Flat, measured, the way you tap a bridge deck to hear if it's sound. He swallowed, Adam's apple bobbing. Close up, I saw the seam where his coat sleeve had been hand-stitched. I was passing through," he tried, then winced at the smallness of it. "I needed to see you. To say—" He stopped, air catching like a gear that wouldn't seat. Behind us, the street hummed with the low ribbon of traffic, maples whispering dry leaves along the curb. Memory moved in, quick cuts, bright and unwelcome. Rain on the night he left. A duffel bag. My mother's voice breaking on the stairwell. I held the door with one hand and the past with the other, and neither felt steady. "You don't get to walk in and—" I started, then caught myself, breath stalling on the word walk. He dipped his head, as if bracing for whatever I would or wouldn't allow. Up close, he smelled like cheap coffee and laundry soap from a coin-op. From the living room, my phone buzzed on the arm of the couch, and a sliced second thought of escape flashed. Rachel would know what to say. Rachel Hart, 29, pediatric nurse, Midwestern transplant with a warm laugh that makes strangers relax. Brown hair in a no-nonsense ponytail, scrubs most days, a denim jacket tonight tossed over the back of a chair, a steady presence, a small-town heart she carried across the country in a hatchback with a cracked taillight. She had a way of telling the truth without drawing blood. "I'm not here to make trouble," Thomas said, softer now. "I'm not here to take anything." His hands tightened on the hat brim. "I just wanted to look my son in the eye and tell him I'm sorry." The porch light hummed. A moth pinged the bulb and spiraled away. I looked past him. At the sidewalk I shoveled every winter, the address numbers I repainted in June, the life I built with measurements and plans. The part of me that remembers learning to tie a fishing knot on his knee tugged once, then went still. "Okay," I said, the word landing heavier than I meant. "You've said you're sorry." Silence slid between us. He nodded, accepting the thinness of what I'd given. No lecture, no invitation, just a plank not wide enough to cross. My phone buzzed again. I let the screen light my palm. Rach, off in 10. "Grab tea?" I typed with my thumb. "Come by. Might need ears." And hit send before I could second-guess the ask. The sound of rain against the kitchen window carried me back, uninvited. I sat at the table with Rachel across from me, a half-finished cup of chamomile between us. She listened without interrupting as I recounted every word from the porch, every tremor in my father's voice. When I paused, she reached over, resting her hand on mine. "Sometimes," she said softly, "people vanish because they don't know how to stay, not because they stop caring." I looked at her, trying to decide if she believed that, or wanted me to. That night, after she left, I couldn't sleep. I found the old family album buried in the hallway closet, dust thick on the cover. Pictures from a time before everything cracked, before Dad's laughter became distant thunder. There was one photo I hadn't seen in years, all 5 of us standing by a half-finished treehouse in our backyard. Dad in a white undershirt, a hammer in hand, hair still dark and full. Mom, Laura Miller, 29 back then, a teacher with kind eyes and an exhaustion she tried to hide. My older brother Ben, 12. Freckled and protective, one arm slung around me like he knew storms were coming, and Sophie, barely 5, sitting on Dad's shoulders, beaming at a sky that hadn't turned gray yet. I remember the night it all fell apart. The walls in our house on Alder Street had paper-thin patience. Arguments about bills, late rent, and another bounced check became our lullabies. Dad's voice would rise, harsh but desperate. "I can't keep drowning like this, Laura." And she'd answer, "We all are, Tom, but you don't walk away from family." I'd listen from the stairs, clutching my toy truck until my knuckles went white. On his last night, he came into my room while I was brushing my teeth. I can still see it, the yellow bathroom light, his reflection in the mirror behind me. "Hey, champ," he said, trying for casual, his flannel sleeves rolled halfway. His hands trembled just enough that even at 10 I noticed. "Going somewhere?" I'd asked. He smiled, too slow. "Just for a bit. I'll see you soon, okay?" But soon never came. By morning, his closet was empty, and Mom sat at the kitchen table with a crumpled note she never let us read. Years later, she told me he'd lost his job at the sawmill, couldn't find work, started drinking. The pressure to provide had hollowed him out. I didn't want to believe it then. It felt too human for the kind of abandonment we'd suffered. But now, after seeing him again, older, smaller, I wondered if she'd been right. I closed the album and leaned back in my chair. The house, too quiet. My phone buzzed. It was Rachel again. "You awake?" I typed back, "Yeah." A few seconds later, she called. Her voice was warm, even through the static. "You're thinking yourself in circles, Ethan. Don't make him the ghost that decides how you live." The next morning, I drove to Mom's house. The porch still smelled like her gardenia candles, the same ones she used when we were kids. She opened the door in her robe, silver hair pinned up, eyes sharp as ever. "He came by, didn't he?" she said before I could speak. "Yeah," I admitted. "Said he wanted to explain." She sighed, the kind that had 20 years of tired in it. "I told him last week not to bother. He made his choice." Behind her, the house was the same. Photos lined up neatly, clock ticking steady, but something in her expression softened when she looked at me. "You're not him," she said quietly. "Don't let his return make you forget that." I nodded, even though my chest still felt tight. "He said he just wants to talk," I murmured. She gave a small, knowing smile. "Talking's easy, Ethan. Staying, that's the hard part." Outside, the clouds broke just enough for sunlight to slip through, glinting off the wet pavement. For a second, it looked like hope. Then the wind changed, carrying the faint scent of sawdust and rain, and the echo of a promise never kept. Thomas shifted as if the porch boards creaked a verdict. "I'll go," he murmured. "I didn't expect—" He didn't finish. He stepped back into the cool cap twisting in his hands. "You know where to find me," he added, and the line sounded borrowed, like he'd practiced it and heard how wrong it was only now. I closed the door to a careful click and leaned my forehead against the wood. In the quiet, the house felt like it had taken a deeper breath than I had. Through the window, his figure drifted down the walk, a thin shadow under the street lamp, then turned the corner and was gone. When Rachel let herself in 15 minutes later, she paused on the threshold, 5'6", denim jacket over a gray sweater, a paper cup fogging the air. She took one look at me and set the cup in my hand. "Talk to me," she said, gentle, then steadier. I nodded once. The words came slow, with pauses where the old rain still lived, and for the first time in years, I said his name out loud in my own house. By the time I got back from Mom's, the sky over Riverbend had turned a bruised gray. I parked outside my place and sat in the truck for a moment, engine idling low, hands tight around the steering wheel. I knew what I had to do next. Call Ben and Sophie. The thought made my stomach twist. 20 years of silence from Dad had shaped us differently, carved out separate versions of the same. Pain. I dialed Ben first. He picked up after 3 rings, voice rough, like he'd been sleeping. Ben Miller, 33, broad-shouldered, ex-college linebacker turned auto mechanic, still in the same town he swore he'd leave. He's got oil on his hands more often than peace on his mind, and ever since Dad left, he's carried a short fuse and a long memory. "Hey, man," he said, wary. "Everything okay?" I took a breath. He showed up, Ben. "Last night." Silence, then the sound of him exhaling through his teeth. "Dad?" His tone sharpened. "What the hell did he want?" "Said he wants to talk, to make things right." A low laugh came through, bitter. "Now he cares. Where was he when Mom was working double shifts? When I dropped out of school to pay rent?" I heard the clatter of a wrench hitting the concrete. "He's not a dad, Ethan. He's a stranger who left." I rubbed my temple. "I know. But maybe he's—" Don't. His voice cracked just enough to make me stop. Don't give him that maybe. He doesn't deserve it. The line went quiet. I just thought you should know, I said softly. Yeah, thanks, he muttered, and the call ended with the hollow click of someone shutting a door they'd nailed shut long ago. I stared at the screen for a full minute before scrolling to Sophie's name. Sophie Miller, 25, the heart of us all. Elementary art teacher, gentle voice, messy bun always half falling apart. She was 6 when Dad left, too young to understand, but old enough to feel the cold that followed. She answered on the second ring, cheerful at first. Ethan, you calling about the wedding plans? I hesitated. Not exactly. My pause was enough. What happened? She asked, tone shifting. He came back. Her inhale caught. Dad? I nodded even though she couldn't see me. He showed up at my door, said he wants to explain. There was a long silence, then a small sigh. I don't know what to feel, she whispered. I spent years imagining what I'd say if he ever came back, but now... Her voice trailed off, and I pictured her sitting cross-legged on the couch of her tiny apartment, paint still smudged on her hands, the afternoon light catching the engagement ring she'd shown me last month. Do you think I should see him? She asked. I don't know, I said honestly. Mom says we don't owe him anything. Ben's furious. I rubbed the bridge of my nose. I don't know what the right thing is. Sophie sighed again, softer this time. Maybe there isn't a right thing. Just what we can live with. Later that night, I sat on the back porch with Rachel. The moon hung low over the neighbors' rooftops, and she had her knees tucked under her denim jacket, watching me with that quiet patience she carried everywhere. How did they take it? She asked. Like I dropped a bomb, I said. She smiled sadly. Families usually do when ghosts walk back in. I laughed once, low and tired. Ben's angry, Sophie's scared, Mom's done, and me. I'm just caught between. Rachel leaned forward, eyes steady. You can't carry everyone's pain, Ethan. You have to decide what you need from this. I looked at her, the wind teasing strands of her hair loose. What if I don't know? I asked. Then start there, she said simply. When she left, the house felt smaller again. I looked at my phone on the table, at the string of missed calls from an unknown number that could only be him. I didn't answer. Not yet. I wasn't ready to hear his voice again. But for the first time in years, I didn't hang up on the possibility that I might. The following Friday started with rain that never quite decided to fall. It just hovered there, a gray weight over the streets of Riverbend. I'd spent the morning sketching load diagrams at my drafting table, but every time I drew a line, I saw his face instead. By noon, I gave up and drove to the diner on Main Street, the one with the flickering neon coffee cup in the window, to meet Ben. He was already there, sitting in a booth near the back, sleeves rolled, eyes half hidden under a trucker cap. He looked older than 33 should look, like the world had sanded down all his edges. You look like you haven't slept, I said, sliding in across from him. Haven't, he muttered, stirring his coffee until it went cold. Listen, I've been thinking. He didn't wait for me to answer. Maybe we should meet him. I blinked. Meet him. Ben. 2 days ago, you wanted to punch a hole in your wall over him. Yeah, he said, shoulders tense, but that was anger talking. Now it's just noise. I keep hearing him say he wants to explain. Maybe I need to hear whatever excuse he's got just once so I can finally stop wondering. I studied him, the lines under his eyes, the way his hands wouldn't stop moving. You really think it'll fix anything? He shrugged. I don't think it'll fix a damn thing. I just want to stop carrying it around. His tone softened, something raw slipping through. You ever think about how different things would have been if he'd stayed? I didn't answer. We both knew the math on that question didn't work anymore. When I got home that evening, Rachel was in the kitchen, hair tied up, reading a patient chart on her tablet. She looked up as soon as she saw my face. Ben, she asked. I nodded. He wants to meet Dad. She set the tablet down slowly. And you? I hesitated, leaning against the counter. I don't know. Part of me wants to slam the door again, but another part wants to see if anything's left to save. She studied me, then reached for something on the table, a small, leather-bound notebook. She handed it to me. What's this? I asked. A blank journal, she said. Call it a place for the things you never said. Write it down before you meet him. That way, when you're face to face, you'll know what's worth saying out loud. The next morning, I drove out to Mom's house to tell her. She opened the door before I even knocked. "Let me guess," she said, arms folded. "Ben's planning something foolish." "He wants to meet Dad," I admitted. "He asked me to come." Her eyes narrowed, worry flickering behind them. "Ethan, you don't owe him your peace." "I know," I said softly. "But maybe Ben needs it." She sighed, the kind that comes from 2 decades of holding the line. "You boys never learn. Closure isn't something he can give you. It's something you decide." Then her expression softened. "If you go, don't go looking for forgiveness. Go looking for truth, and only if you can bear to hear it." By evening, I texted Ben. "Let's do it." Saturday, Brookside Park, 2 p.m. He replied a minute later, "Thanks, brother." As I set the phone down, Rachel slipped her hand into mine. "You sure?" she asked. "No," I said, honest, "but maybe it's time." She smiled gently. "Then start by writing the first thing you'd say if the little boy in you could speak." I opened the notebook, pen trembling just enough to blur the ink, and wrote the words I'd never said aloud. "You left, but I stayed, and I need to know why." Outside, the rain finally began to fall, steady, quiet, like the sky had been holding its breath all day. Saturday came with the kind of cold that made the air sting your lungs. The clouds hung low over Riverbend, turning the whole town into a muted watercolor. I woke up early, long before my alarm, and spent an hour pacing between the kitchen and the window. Every time I told myself I could cancel, something deep in my chest said, "No, finish it." By 1 o'clock, I drove to pick up Ben. He was waiting outside his apartment, arms folded, jacket zipped to the chin, a shadow of hesitation crossing his face. "You ready?" I asked through the rolled-down window. He gave a dry laugh. "Ready as anyone can be to dig up a grave you built yourself." He climbed in, the smell of engine oil following him, familiar in a strangely comforting way. We didn't talk much on the drive. The radio stayed off. The only sounds were the steady hum of the tires and the rhythm of 2 people pretending they weren't afraid. We stopped at a coffee drive-thru, more for something to hold than to drink. I watched the steam rise from Ben's cup as he stared out of the window. "What are you going to say to him?" I asked. "I don't know," he muttered. "Maybe nothing. Maybe I'll just listen, see if he's still the same coward who ran." His voice cracked slightly, but he didn't hide it. I nodded, gripping the wheel tighter. "Then we'll listen, together." By the time we reached Riverbend Park, the sky had turned pale silver, the air thick with damp pine. We spotted him right away. Thomas Miller sitting alone on a wooden bench near the pond, hands clasped, a faded brown jacket pulled tight against the wind. He looked smaller than I remembered, the kind of small that comes from years of regret. His hair was thinner, more gray than brown now, his face a map of creases carved by time and guilt. Ben and I exchanged a look, then walked over. Dad stood when he saw us, uncertainty flickering across his face. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. His voice trembled, not with weakness, but with something like awe, like he couldn't believe we'd actually shown up. Ben crossed his arms. "We almost didn't." Dad nodded once, accepting it like a punishment he'd already sentenced himself to. "I understand. I wouldn't have come if I didn't mean it." The silence that followed stretched long and uneasy. Wind rippled across the pond. Somewhere in the distance, a child laughed, an almost cruel sound against everything heavy between us. "I know I hurt you," Dad began, his hands twisting together. "I know walking away destroyed things I can never rebuild, but I need you to understand. It wasn't because I stopped loving any of you. I left because I thought I was the problem." Ben scoffed. "That's what you tell yourself to sleep at night?" Dad's eyes lifted, wet and unflinching. "No. It's what I told myself to survive. I was drowning, Ben. I lost my job. I was behind on every bill, and every day I woke up feeling like I was failing you all. I thought if I left, maybe Mom could rebuild without me pulling her under." I took a slow breath, feeling the old ache stir. "You thought leaving made things better?" My voice came out sharper than I intended. She broke her back, trying to keep us alive. Ben quit school to pay bills. Sophie cried herself to sleep, thinking it was her fault. He swallowed, eyes glistening. "I know," he whispered. "I've replayed it every day for 20 years. And every time I tried to come back, I told myself you didn't need me anymore." Ben stepped forward, fists clenched. We didn't. We needed you then. Now it's too late." His voice cracked on the last word, and that pain, the one we'd both buried differently, hung heavy between us. Dad didn't argue. He just nodded, tears spilling freely now. "You're right," he said quietly. "It is too late to fix it, but maybe it's not too late to say I'm sorry." I stared at him, searching for something genuine, something that wasn't just guilt. And for the first time, I saw it. The man underneath the mistakes. The one who used to carry me on his shoulders, who built that treehouse before life tore the boards apart. The wind shifted, cold and clean. I felt something in me loosen, not forgiveness, not yet, but a crack in the wall I'd built too well. Ben turned away first, jaw tight. "You got what you wanted," he said. "Say you're sorry. We heard it. That's all there is." But Dad shook his head slowly. "No, son, that's not all there is. There's still what you do after." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small photograph, faded, corners worn. It was the same picture from the treehouse. He handed it to me with trembling fingers. "I carried this every day," he said softly. "I didn't earn another one." I took it, not ready to speak. Ben stared at the ground. The silence that followed wasn't peace, but it wasn't war either. When we finally walked away, I heard Dad sit back down on the bench behind us, the old wood creaking under his weight. In the car, Ben didn't speak. Neither did I. We just drove through the gray light of evening, the photo resting on the dash between us, like proof that the past was still breathing. But maybe, just maybe, ready to heal. The morning after the park meeting felt strangely hollow, like the quiet that comes when thunder moves on, but leaves the air heavy. I woke before dawn, unable to shake the image of my father sitting on that bench, shoulders bent beneath the weight of his own words. The photo he'd given me lay on my nightstand, edges curled, colors fading, but it still felt alive somehow, like the echo of a heartbeat that refused to fade. By mid-morning, I was at Mom's house again. The smell of coffee and gardenia candles drifted through the kitchen, just like always. She looked up from her crossword puzzle when I stepped in. "You saw him," she said. It wasn't a question. I nodded, setting the photo on the table between us. Her eyes lingered on it for a long moment before she exhaled. "He looks old," she murmured. "Time catches us all, I guess." I could tell she wanted to say more, but instead she rose, walked to the pantry, and came back holding a small brown box. "He left this on the porch 2 days ago. I wasn't sure I wanted to open it." I took the box carefully, the cardboard soft with age. Inside, under a layer of yellowed tissue paper, were letters, dozens of them, bundled with a thin string. My name, Ben's, Sophie's, even Mom's, written in the uneven hand I remembered from childhood notes he used to leave on the fridge. The first envelope was dated 18 years ago. I hesitated, then opened it. "Dear Ethan," it began, "I'm sorry I couldn't call. I know you don't understand now, but someday I hope you will. I'm trying to get steady again. I miss the sound of your laugh when you used to help me fix the truck. Keep looking after your brother and sister." The ink had bled in places, the kind of damage that happens when paper meets regret. Mom watched me silently as I read. "He never mailed them," I said. "No," she replied quietly. "He must have written them for himself. Maybe it was all he could do to stay sane." She sipped her coffee, eyes distant. "He wasn't a good husband, but I think he always wanted to be a better man than he was." That evening, Sophie stopped by. She'd come straight from work, still wearing her art teacher badge, her hair messy from a day with second graders. I showed her the letters. She sat down beside me on the couch, fingers trembling as she untied the string. "These are to us," she whispered. "All of them." She opened one addressed to her. It was written in block letters, as if he'd tried to make it easy for her to read as a child. "Sweetheart, I hope you're painting again. You always said colors made you feel safe. I think of you every time I see something bright." Sophie's eyes filled. "He remembered that," she said softly. No one else did. We sat in silence. The letters spread across the table, like pieces of a life interrupted. For every year he'd been gone, there was a page filled with the words he never sent. Some were apologies, others were simple updates, a new job, a rented room, a birthday missed but not forgotten. That night, Sophie made a decision that startled me. "I'm inviting him to the wedding," she said, "not to forgive him, but because I don't want to look back and wonder what might have happened if I hadn't." Mom, standing in the doorway, didn't protest. She just looked at us both, her expression unreadable, then nodded once. "If you're strong enough to face him there," she said softly, "then maybe it's time." Later, when I drove home, I carried the letters in the passenger seat, their quiet weight filling the space where anger used to live. At a red light, I glanced at the notebook Rachel had given me. I flipped to a new page and wrote, "He never stopped writing." Maybe that's how he kept us alive in his mind. Outside, the rain began again, soft this time, washing the streets clean in the glow of the streetlights, like forgiveness trying, finally, to find its way home. The morning of Sophie's wedding broke clear and golden, the kind of Oregon day that felt borrowed from summer. The air smelled like cedar and cut grass, and the fields around Cedar Haven Farm shimmered in soft light. Rows of wooden chairs lined the meadow, draped with white ribbons and wildflowers. I stood near the archway, adjusting my tie for the 5th time. My stomach twisted tighter than I cared to admit. Sophie looked radiant, 25, her auburn hair pinned in loose curls, a lace gown that swayed with every step. She moved between laughter and tears with ease, her eyes bright but trembling at the edges. "You good?" I asked, walking up beside her as she waited for the photographer. She smiled, though her lip quivered. "Ask me again, after the vows." Her fiancé, David, a tall man with kind eyes and a steady presence, waved from across the field. He was everything our father wasn't, grounded, patient, sure of his word. Mom arrived next, elegant in a soft blue dress, silver hair shining in the sunlight. She carried herself with the quiet grace of someone who's learned to survive storms and still find beauty in the wreckage. When she saw Sophie, her eyes filled, but her voice stayed firm. "You look just like I dreamed you would." Sophie hugged her tight, whispering, "Thanks for holding everything together." Then Ben appeared, straightening his suit jacket like armor. He gave me a half smile. "Can't believe we made it through all this without punching anyone." I chuckled. Day's not over yet. But behind his grin, I could see the unease in his shoulders. We all felt it, the question hanging in the air, waiting for the moment he'd arrive. At 2:30, as the guests settled and music drifted through the trees, I saw him, Thomas Miller, standing at the edge of the meadow, hesitant, almost ghost-like in his brown suit. He looked smaller than before, but somehow lighter too, as if carrying those letters had unburdened him a little. In his hands was a small bouquet, wildflowers clumsily tied with twine. I caught Sophie's glance. She froze mid-sentence, then nodded once, subtle but sure. "Let him stay," she whispered. Mom noticed too. Her jaw tensed, then slowly relaxed. She didn't look at him directly, but her hand found the pendant at her neck, the same one Dad had given her on their 10th anniversary. After a long pause, she said quietly, "It's her day. If she's at peace with it, so am I." When the ceremony began, Thomas stood at the very back, almost hidden beneath the oak tree. I saw him watch Sophie walk down the aisle on Mom's arm, his lips trembling with a smile he was afraid to let show. He didn't cry until the vows, when Sophie promised David that she'd build a home where love doesn't walk away. I saw his shoulders shake then, the soundless grief of a man realizing the depth of what he lost. After the ceremony, as the sun slipped lower and the guests moved to the reception tent, Sophie turned to me. "I want to talk to him," she said. I hesitated, then nodded. She walked across the field, her gown brushing the grass, and stopped a few feet from our father. He started to speak, but she raised a hand. "Don't apologize," she said softly. "You've done enough of that. I just needed to see your face, to know you were real." Her eyes glistened. "I read your letters, every one of them, and I think part of me already forgave you without knowing it." Thomas blinked hard, words caught behind the lump in his throat. "You didn't have to let me come," he whispered, "but you did." She smiled faintly. "You gave me colors once, remember? Paints for my birthday." He nodded slowly, his voice cracking. "You said you wanted to make the world brighter." She took a deep breath. "I still do." Mom joined them then, walking slowly, her heels sinking into the grass. For a moment, no one spoke. Then she reached out, touching his arm, the smallest, quietest gesture, but it held more forgiveness than words ever could. "You can sit with us for dinner," she said. Simply, his lips parted in disbelief. "Laura, it's not for you," she said. "It's for them, for the family we still have." That night, as the fairy lights flickered above the dance floor and laughter filled the air, Thomas sat at our table, silent, humbled, watching his children with a look that was both sorrow and peace. Ben gave him a curt nod. Sophie smiled, and Mom, for the first time in 2 decades, didn't turn away. Later, as I stood outside beneath the stars, Rachel joined me, her hand warm in mine. "Feels different tonight," she said. I nodded, watching my family through the window, fractured, imperfect, but together. "It does," I said quietly. Like something finally stopped bleeding, she leaned her head against my shoulder. "You think you'll forgive him?" I thought about the letters, the photo, the years between us. "Maybe not all at once," I said, "but I think I already started." When I drove Dad home after everyone left, he looked out at the night, eyes wet but calm. "Thank you," he whispered, "for letting me be there." I didn't answer right away. The road stretched out ahead, quiet and endless. Then I said the words that had lived in me for 20 years. "You left, but I stayed. And somehow, we both found our way back." He smiled through tears, and for the first time since I was 10, I believed him. The night closed softly around us, and in that fragile stillness, forgiveness didn't feel like surrender. It felt like finally coming home. The week after Sophie's wedding, Riverbend felt quieter, the kind of quiet that didn't ache anymore. The leaves along Maple Street had started turning gold, and for the first time in a long time, I walked past my father's old house without feeling that sharp pull in my chest. He'd left again, this time not to run away, but to give us space. He said he'd write, not to make up for lost years, but to stay honest about the ones ahead. Every Sunday, Mom hosts dinner again. Ben brings beer, Sophie brings dessert, and Rachel, who somehow fits right in, brings peace. There's laughter now, easy and real. Sometimes when the evening sun catches the framed photo of the treehouse on the wall, I think about how broken we were and how strange it is that forgiveness can grow from those same cracks. Dad isn't at every dinner. He knows that's not his place anymore, but every now and then he stops by with flowers from his backyard, wild ones, untidy but sincere, and Mom doesn't turn him away. She even smiles sometimes. As for me, I finally understood what Rachel meant when she said people vanish because they don't know how to stay. My father didn't leave because he stopped loving us. He left because he didn't know how to love himself enough to stay. And maybe forgiveness isn't about forgetting the pain. Maybe it's about remembering it without letting it own you. That night, I sat by the window with Rachel's head, resting on my shoulder, the same notebook she gave me, open on my lap. I wrote one last line beneath the others. "We can't rebuild the past, but we can still build something worth standing on." Then I closed the notebook, set it on the table, and let the quiet settle in. A good quiet, the kind that sounds like peace. Forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't make wrong right or fix 20 lost years, but it frees you from carrying what can no longer be changed. Sometimes the only way home is forward.